and the grind. Millennials have a serious problem. And so this episode, I'm going to be talking to people under the age of 40 directly. And for those who don't know me well, I'm always talking to people younger. I'm always talking to the 15 to 25 market that is YouTube's primary base. And so this one's going to be winding. It's always winding when I talk, because it's not that I haven't ever thought these things out before. It's that I've never said these things. And when you begin to speak, your brain automatically starts to fill in connections in your neurons to use the information that you've thought about. And so the information you've thought about is kind of circles. And now I don't think in images and I don't think in words the way other people do. The mnemonic that I use is geometries. I meditated on sacred geometrical images like the seed and flower of life and Metatron's cube so much as a teenager and person in my young 20s that what I see, so to speak, what I imagine, or the way I conceptualize the complexity of thought, but of my own thoughts, is in these geometries. And many of them have become three-dimensional over time. And so this is a technique that is no longer used today. It is the technique that the Pythagoreans used, and I've teased you with that in shorts before. So it is more difficult for me at this stage of my life, but maybe forever, to communicate at a low level of abstraction than normal people, because I haven't thought at a low level of abstraction in decades. But that's what I want to talk about. I want to begin today's episode by explaining to you a little bit about why I like the grind. You understand? Because this game, Final Fantasy III, is the game that I play when I want to grind. And then you go, well, why do you want to grind? I know there are people out there who ask that, because when I talk to people, for example, I spoke to a teenager on the public transit on the bus the other day on my way home. Home is a relative word. I live in a tent. I am homeless. But on my way back to my tent, right, back to where my sleeping spot, back to my home, my domicile, Madge will like that. And he and I've told this story at length, but I'll repeat it in short. He and I were talking about my work. And when I told him that I like to play old school turn-based RPGs, he asked me if I ever play any old school action RPGs. And the answer is, well, no. Some. They're harder to play on my phone and harder to get copies of. But emulators are a thing. And the answer is that I find them very difficult, and I find them unrewarding. And you go, but how can you find them unrewarding? You still get more powerful, and you advance the story, and you fight bosses, and then the game is over. And you've won, and you did a difficult thing, and is that not rewarding in its own right? And we have to talk a little bit about history And we have to talk about childhood development and childhood psychological development a little bit. And what I realize is that I have been speaking to you as though you know these things. Millennials, people younger. But what I realize now is that my experience of life was deliberately and old, a much older version of how life was lived than yours, the way you grew up. Millennials, anyone younger than a millennial, you may or may not know, because you may or may not have even known to be paying attention to this, that ours, the millennial generation, people under 40, ours was the first soft generation. Ours was the first generation of participation trophies. And you can see it, frankly, if you watch sports. You can see how the participation trophy has affected competition if you watch the NFL. You don't have to, and this isn't about that. But I know that millennials resent... I'm adjusting in my tent. It's 6 a.m. It is pitch dark before the dawn. And they're not kidding. When people say it's always darkest before the dawn, they've been outside. Well, and people know what the fuck they're saying when they say that, when they say it from life experience. When that idiom was first made idiomatic, the reason it was made idiomatic is because, holy shit, it gets dark right before dawn. Even the moon checks out for a little while. Okay. So I'm talking to you about grinding and why I like to grind. And we're going to have to do some history. And you're going to hear some things you don't like. And that's okay. Especially you, millennials. Ours was this first generation, as I said, that got participation trophies. Ours was the participation trophy generation. But what we may not appreciate about that isn't just that we got participation trophies. It's not just that equity and inclusion and, well, diversity, but that's not what I want to say. And the broad 90s milieu, right? They had an effect on us. They had a long-term effect on us. And we aren't old enough yet. It takes 30 years to do this. We aren't old enough yet to have looked back at our children as a generation in biblical terms and criticize our parents. And the reason is strange. And so we have to go further back in history. And what we have to do is we have to look at the 1960s and the 1970s. We have to look at the 1950s. And the best way that we can do that, really, is through our art. Okay? We can really get a good idea of what the people who were alive in the 60s and the 70s, even as early as the 1950s, in the United States, what they were like, what they believed, what they were afraid of, and what they dreamed for their children in the art that was made. So we can watch movies, and we can watch television, and we can read books, and we can play video games, okay? These are ways that we can study history. And so, in no small way, in a very literal and direct way, I am I'm playing these video games as a history, like an historian, as a well, when I say as a history, the word history in Greek means inquiry, and Herodotus, the inventor, you might say, of history as a literary profession, um, he was telling other people's stories, so to speak, and this isn't really that idiomatic, it is pretty literal. So to speak, he was telling stories out of school. And what that means is that he was telling stories that it was not his business to tell, because now we're in the very ancient world, and I'm not going to apologize for that, but we are in the very ancient world right now. With Herodotus, maybe, I'm not sure, maybe 500 BC is older than him. But he's telling a foreign people's stories to a Greek audience, to his audience. And so there is something that we don't really talk about, that like in modern terms, that's just and only straight up what that is cultural appropriation. And we don't really get on Herodotus, because we historians, I'm not really a trained historian, but I think of myself as like an historian. One of the things that we do is we assume that preserving a story in any culture is a noble deed. We assume it because we've never really tested whether preserving other civilizations, other cultures, other people's culture stories, their cultural and frankly individual personal identities, is theft. We just don't engage with whether that may or may not be. And that's okay. That's okay, because that's not what we're here to do right now. We're here to talk about why I like grinding, and I told you a little bit about what the craft of history is like, because I like to play these games like an historian, because we can use these games to engage in our histories and to really get into the minds of peoples of the past. And there's a utility in that as ordinary people, not just as professionals. And I'm not a professional yet, not quite. I have to make money, and I have to make more than $25 a month. I have to be able to support myself in order to be a professional. You have to have food and shelter, if not financial independence, in order to be considered a professional. I'm telling you this because the participation trophy wasn't just a trophy. See, millennials got partial credit is an essay that I once wrote. It's a title of an essay that I once wrote. But we got partial credit. We were graded on a curve, not in school, in life, for the first time. We were the first generation that was graded on a curve in life. We were the first generation that got to really benefit from affirmative action. We were the first generation that really got to benefit from interracial marriages and interracial casual sex being normalized in the 90s by interracial marriages and casual sex in pornography through the 50s, or from the 50s through, the 80s, the year that we were born. Years that we were born. Okay, I talk about pornography too much to be talking to teenagers. But the reason I talk honestly about pornography with teenagers is because my father spoke honestly with me about pornography when I was young, and my mother struggled with an addiction to sexual behavior, frankly, but pornography that really really strangely affected my family in ways that I don't think women even appreciate, that women watch or might even take an interest in pornography. And so you have to remember that pornography is also a grind, because it's a production industry and they produce billions of hours of content a year. And moreover, that in the same way that I'm expected to find financial independence any way I can get it, and as a person with a phone, I am expected to do what I'm doing, to find some way to make art. You understand? That's what this is. I am an artist. At heart, I am a poet and a storyteller. And even though I may be the world's worst storyteller, I may be the world's worst inquisitor, world's worst inquirer. Uh, I am putting in the work. You understand? Okay. So our first generation was the first generation that was expected internally, which expected to not have to grind. We were the first generation that expected to not have to practice in order to get a trophy at the end of the season, because many people, many, especially small children, and we're going to get to the whys, but I need to be better about not focusing so much so early on why. You know that about me. We were the first generation to expect to get a trophy at the end, and many people came to associate the trophy with the thing. Right, well, mom just wants a trophy to put on the shelf, and so I'm going to do this so mom has a trophy, right? And we came to associate the kids who got trophies, now not millennials, children in the 50s through the year we were born, the 80s. Oh, okay. Many people associated the trophy with why they were doing what they were doing. Most children are trying to make their parents proud, and when mom says she's proud and puts whatever on the refrigerator and then starts to stack trophies in cases, well, we associate winners with trophies in cases. We associated winners with trophies and cases in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And then you start to see in the 80s that the counterculture very much noticed that the people who stacked trophies for mom also tended to be overweight, alcoholic, and, well, wife abusers, and frankly used car salesmen. We figured out that people who were pathological about pleasing mom and dad were difficult people to be around in late adulthood. And so now we're going to talk again about a little bit of history about what those people who were young while the world was coming to the conclusion that the people who are pathological about pleasing mom and dad are actually pretty insufferable to be around in late adulthood. Well, those people who began to notice that, they began to write. And in the period of the 1950s through the through 2020, but specifically through our childhoods, so until, let's end at 2001, okay? The big trauma that formed all of our millennial lives, all of our ways of life, all of our worldviews. Between 1950 and 2001, the people who were writing about parenthood were writing about parenthood, and they were writing about children's developmental psychology and this was not a complex market, so it was actually a dualistic market. So they were writing from one of two, and polar and opposed positions. They were writing from the position that children are stupid and need to be forced into a mold that will make them sufferable adults, if not sufferable, useful. And utility is a pathology among people aged 50 and lower. You find it less and less and less the younger the people you talk to are. But utility is a pathology among children of this time period, because half of parents thought that what they needed was, no matter where they lived or what their socioeconomic status was, they needed children who had utility, children who were useful. And now I'm going to go into Shaggy story mode. And what I'm going to tell you is that I had a lovely and wonderful conversation with the bus driver yesterday. And she's the kind of woman that other women really denigrate. They really talk shit about her. They're really unkind to her. They gossip about her. And then they use her as a metric for self-satisfaction. And I learned why yesterday. Now, I actually have no problem with her as a bus driver. If you listen to my shorts or some of my homeless vlogs, or just some of my, like, oh, I'm at a bus stop and I've got 15 minutes, let me talk to you a little bit, videos on the main channel. This is going to be talking to the future, obviously. It's a video game, and we are talking about grinding. Don't think I've forgotten. This is a demonstration, not the video game. The way that I'm handling this conversation is a demonstration of what grinding looks like. We're going to grind our way through this difficult and enormous problem, and I'm going to explain to you how that visual metaphor will work for you as we go along. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story about my bus driver now. Let me give you a little bit of context. Let me give you a little bit of side story as we get into this, because I'm a bad storyteller, and I know what you need to know, and I front load it because the story itself isn't very good. And I can tell you a story about that too. And I can teach you what to do with these, not just in a way that will make me happy, and which will fulfill your stripper rules. I was thinking about that video. Should I take it down? Do I still mean that? And yes, I still mean it. But I no longer mean throw me dollars. I mean throw me likes, subs, comments, shares. Bring your friends and get them to talk with you in the comments of my channel. That's how you can fulfill your stripper rules. You can make my academy noisy. You understand? And then I can start doing Shaggy Academy on the main channel again. And then I can really upset some worldviews. And so we're talking about the history of children. And I'm going to tell you a story about a woman who grew up in between 1950 and 2001. Well, really 1950 and 1980. I don't know how old she is, but I know that she's a contemporary with the other lady bus drivers. And I've listened to the other lady bus drivers, and I've listened to them specifically talk to men. And the way women talk about other women to men is about sexual selectivity. You don't have to like that, and you don't have to agree with me. I encourage you to disagree with me. Disagree with me in the comments if you don't think, as a woman, or even as a man, but if you as a human being disagree that when women are talking to men about other women, what they are doing is trying to establish that they are more desirable sexually than the other woman. whether they know it or not. And so I've listened to the other lady bus drivers talk about the bus driver that I'm going to tell a story about. And they all talk shit about her. They say unkind things, not terrible things, just unkind things. Like that she's not a very good bus driver. That she gets back to the station too early, and that she skips stops and things like this. And what I noticed about her, the thing that really jumps out to me about her, this lady bus driver that I'm going to tell this story about. I don't tend to catch people's names, especially women, because there's a power which comes with knowing a woman's name, and there's a vulnerability. I can talk shit about her using her name, and she wouldn't know that or have any way to defend herself. So I tend to make women think that I have no interest in them as human beings because I don't ask for their names. That's the sort of thing that you have to volunteer, you have to surrender, you have to sacrifice to me. And that's fine. Continuing on. They say about her, and these things are true, that she'll anticipate the flow of foot traffic in town, and she'll be early to stops that some people find inconvenient, or she'll be early back to the station so she can be early to get to her first stop. These are things that are true about her, but they said them as negatives, and maybe they are negatives. Maybe after a certain age, anything inconvenient is a broad negative, and I'm not going to say that's not true, and I'm going to say that you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't live that way, but that's how life can be lived. What I will say about this woman is that she says hello to everyone, and she's the only driver who announces that a stop is coming out loud and what the name of the stop is. So she announces the stops as they're listed on the map. What I find useful about this is that means that when I'm on the bus and I'm only kind of paying attention, or if I were on a new bus that I hadn't ridden before, I would know where I am relative to the map. Because bus maps, if you haven't used public transit, bus maps can be intransigent, I think is the correct word. They can be intractable. They can be very difficult to read because, they're not trying to be a map of the city for you to navigate the city on foot. They're trying to be a quick primer of what this bus route is going to look like for you. And so I find that highly useful. I find her highly useful, and I've never missed her. Not when I should have. Now, she can be very early to her stops, but when you hear me complain about that fucking bitch skipped me again, she didn't see me standing here because she cheated the route again. That's the lady who's talking shit about her. Does that. She cuts a lot of corners. And so what I've noticed is that people who cut corners and give themselves a lot of extra credit, they tend to spend their time in communication with people who aren't the people they're talking about, making you think that those people are worse than them, because the people who cut a lot of corners in adulthood, who give themselves a lot of extra credit, don't want you to realize how much extra credit they're giving themselves. That comes from the 60s and 70s. That comes directly out of the 1960s and 70s. I wish I could skip this shit. The 1960s and 70s were about women broadly giving themselves extra credit for everything. Because in the 1960s and 70s, accreditation hadn't become what it had become in the 80s. And it certainly hadn't become what it has become now. In the 1960s and 70s, you could still have multiple families in the same town, and they not know it. You could be a scumbag, and there was just no way for people to double check what your life was actually like because of the privacy culture that was still lingering from 1930 to 50. That stuck around because people who were raised with that cultural milieu didn't die. And so now we have to talk historically. We have to jump from this conversation. I'm telling you a story about a woman, the bus driver. I haven't told you our conversation yet, what made me understand who she is as a person. We haven't had that conversation yet. But we have to jump way back in time. The reason we have to jump back in time is because before 1950, before the conclusion of the Second World War, what you don't understand is the real reason that war is an actual dividing line in history. We could very much talk, and our ancestors, our deep ancient ancestors, absolutely would use World War II as an A and B. And what I mean by that is before World War II and after World War II is very much a good dating system. We could very much be in year, let's say World War II ended in 47. We could very much be in, I gotta do this math real quick in my head, I'm sorry. Year 77 after World War II. And we should very much be thinking about our culture, our civilization, our society. We should very much be, and we do, but we should be talking about it in terms of after and before World War II. We talk in terms of after and before Jesus because Jesus was an absolutely world-changing, milieu-changing, culture-changing, way of life-changing, world-view-changing event. The publication of his books and the popular circulation of the Gospels. It was a world-changing event. Well, World War II was an absolute everything-changing event. Everything changed because of World War II. And you have to understand, we're talking in context of the grind, right? And so you know what the grind is. You know what adulting is. And you know, because you've been paying attention to me, that what I'm doing now and always is I am making a broad and shaggy appeal to adulting and why adulting is good, actually. And the answer is wrapped up in the grind, okay? Before World War II, and you don't have to look further than how the wars of the period before World War II were fought. You don't have to look any further than that to see grind. Okay, so everything was a grind back then. In order to make bread, you had to grind the wheat, right? In order to sharpen a sword, you have to put it on a grindstone. You have to grind a whetstone against the blade, right? Everything was grinding, right? And so this is what the wheel of time is. It's a grinding millstone it's a millstone that turns and turns and turns, grinding souls into a more refined form. Okay? So the grind before 1947, before World War II, was seen as spiritual improvement. It was seen as I'm not really sure I'm going to get these words right, but it was seen as a way of getting the grist or whatever, getting the useful flour from the largely inedible, corn, right? Meal. It's getting meal, right? And so what is kind of what is meal? Well, meal is from an etymological standpoint, the reason that it's called meal and that you take a meal is because sometimes all you got to eat, all your only portion of food was a bag of meal that you then had to turn into something. And that usually meant mixing it with water and fat, and now you've got gravy at least that you can put on your meal. Think corn meal. Think, what does that make? What makes cornbread? And what is cornbread? Cornbread is corn powder that's been solidified with butter and a binding agent like eggs and then baked, right? So that's all bread is. You understand? It's something that's been ground into as close to a powder form as you can get it, which is called meal, and then baked with a binding agent, and that's really all it is. And then the more, so like if you remember me talking about how grateful I was for that rye bread that had raisins and nuts in it, I recently saw on Twitter, we're still talking about grind, and I'm appealing to why the grind is good. And then we're going to get back to this story about the 1950s, because I think I've wandered too far. I was trying really hard to stay only to headers, but I may have wandered too far from what I was saying. I may have just wandered in explaining that too far, which means that what I do is I realize, I've gone too far, and then I make myself forget what I was talking about in the same way that in the guided meditation I did with Final Fantasy the other day, I told you, okay, stop thinking about that, and then it's gone from me, and that's okay. So let's refocus our thoughts, because all these cutscenes and dialogues also kind of fuck me up because they're no longer grinding. Okay, so everything was a grind. Everything was a grind, and the grind was seen as spiritual, and it was seen as self-improvement. So grinding away. My first title was Hand to the Grind Screen, because putting your nose to the grindstone meant to go to work. Meant to go to work, and it meant to improve yourself, right? Do what you got to do to get better. Okay, so now that I'm all over the place, I want to talk about this woman again, this bus driver. I get on the bus, and what I like the most about her is that she doesn't ever cheat the route. She doesn't cut corners, and I like that. She doesn't give herself extra credit, and I like that. I don't know how she reacts to being early, because she's never been anything but perfectly on time for me, which suggests to me that when she's like radically early, it's because somebody on the bus told her that they need to be somewhere, and she's making an effort to get them there as quick as possible. I believe that about her, having met her and having engaged with her, and the way she announces every spot, and the way you can't announce every spot the way she does, and I'm going to tell you a story about the way she announces every spot. I just need you to know that detail about her. I need you to have it memorized. You can't do that if you don't know the route. And there are people, I can tell, there are already people, just in whatever it's been, 2 or 3 weeks that she's been doing this, that she's gotten to know, and I'm one of them. She took the time yesterday to get to know me, and so what that means is that people who use the bus every day, not just use it every day, but are always in the same spot at roughly the same time, and I'm always there at roughly the same time. And then the people that you can tell, like me, really find the half-hour bus. So the buses, they used to run at the top of the hour from the station, and now what they do is they run a half-hour bus from the middle part of the route. It doesn't leave the station at the half hour. Well, it does. It leaves the station at the half hour, but on the top of the hour, it's halfway through the route. It's brilliant. I love it. I love that bus line. I tend to take it because the top of the hour bus line leaves me a half hour between where I need to be and where I want to be at all times, and it's really annoying. So I either have to show up places half hour late, or I have to show up half hour early, and I find that annoying. I really do. I don't like sitting around all that much. And you're going to go, but you're sitting around and playing video games now. And the whole conception of this talking to the future is that you have all this downtime, and so you want to use it productively and creatively to help improve the quality of life for young people. All of this is facts. But we're talking about grinding, and we're talking about her. And my point about her is this: not that she's a good woman, not that she's nice, not even so much that she takes the time to get to know people. These are details that you need to know about her, because there is a fact about her that I'm going to approach that you're going to understand. You're going to understand like I did. Because what I did is I spent 2 weeks getting to know these details about her. And then I got to know her very well, I think, by talking to her at length yesterday. And so what we ended up talking about was her childhood, because I volunteer my childhood. Well, this is how I grew up, because when you're talking to people older than about 45, they have lived a long enough life, and they have met enough people with their lives that they can do a little bit of psychoanalysis from your childhood development, because they can draw on their experience of what people are like from what you are like. Like they can go, okay, well, I've known somebody that was like that, and then I can mix him with somebody who was like that, and I can mix him with somebody who was like that, and I can expect what you're probably like. And then I can start to take you at face value when you say things like, well, I'm like this because of this. They go, oh, okay, I know you pretty well then. And so I told her that I started to tell this story. This woman almost crossed into the street. I think I actually started to tell this last time I was talking this game. But this woman almost got run over by her, and I was laughing about it to her. And basically what I said to her is that, I wasn't criticizing her. I grew up in a big family, so I used to carry babies, and none of our mothers carried their babies as late as the women in this town carry their babies. And I was laughing about it, and I said, it's really funny. I see that a lot. I sit around in public and I people watch, and I see it a lot. Women and these babies, these children that are not babies, absolutely flipping their shit that their parents, especially their moms, won't carry them. And I laughed and I said, man, I grew up in a big family, and there were a lot of kids, a lot of babies in my family, and our moms, as soon as we could walk, made us walk. You're walking your ass around. That's why you can do it. I remember my mother telling one of my sisters, you have those legs so you can walk your damn self around. She said, like, you walk your fucking own self around. Oh, I bought too many knives. Oops. That's what you've got them there for, is to provide for yourself. I don't care if you're tired. I don't care if you find it boring. That your legs are there so you can grind away the miles. You see what I'm saying? And our parents told us that when we were children. Now, our parents and my family, they run an older, I've told you before, an older worldview of how children should be raised, how children should be treated, and children should be expected to seek independence in my family's worldview much sooner than in the broad millennial worldview. And this made me different than you. It made me better than you, because it made me willing to suffer the grind, and even to fall in love with it. The grind, that is, not the suffering. Maybe even the suffering. But you understand the suffering of Dharma, as the Buddha conceived it, is the grind of life. It's just going out and living. It's showing up to work every day. Like, that's Dharma. You took that job And so now you have a dharma, you have a duty, a religious and spiritual duty to show up to your life that you benefit from. Okay. And so this woman knows that. And how do I know that this woman knows that? What do I know about her that I know this? And so why am I willing to believe the opposite of what this other woman that I have more experience with says about her, right? And well, the answer may not be obvious to you, but the answer was obvious to me when she told me this story. She grew up in the 60s or the 70s on a farm with 4 brothers and 3 sisters. She was the fourth of 8. Fourth of 8. And I asked her, I said, wow, that's really cool that there were, 4 and 4 of you. There were 2 and 2 of us in my family. And my dad was especially proud of that. And I asked her, I said, did your parents talk about it? Did they do that on purpose? Did they, my dad did it on purpose. He really wanted 2 boys, 2 girls in that order. And that's what he got. And he was so proud of it. It was like his crowning achievement for many years, most of his 20s. It was his crowning achievement. His children were his trophy. And let's pause on that for a moment, because we've been doing history. We've been talking about history, right? And we've been talking about before World War II and after World War II, right? And now, before World War II, most families divided along 2 lines: city and country. Town families were effectively city folk, because if you lived in town, you effectively had to commute or you either had to commute to the city or you had to telecommute to the city. And what I mean by that is you were on the phone with the city, or you were a branch of the city economy. But in the country, you were a farmer, or you were a laborer, or you were both. And this is the point. She was the daughter of a coal miner. He was a coal miner, but he also ran a farm. And when I asked her, I said, did he do that on purpose? She said, absolutely not. She said, my father's life goal, and we're talking about trophies. She said, my father's life goal was to have 11 boys so that he had help on the farm, and so he could work the farm professionally and leave the coal, the coal mine. Right. And so I need to focus a little bit. This one's getting difficult on me all of a sudden to remember what I was talking about, which might mean I just need to go to the Panera and spend my $3. I have $10 remaining, and I really didn't want to, but I might just have to go and get a coffee. But what that means is that she was raised to work. And I told her, I said, that made you you, and it prepared you for an adult life. It prepared you for this economy. And she said, oh, absolutely. Dad struck, and it was 170 days, and he went on strike, and he didn't get help. And so we had to bust ass to make ends meet as children for the farm. And now it's my turn to tell a story, because I understood that woman instantly when she told me that. Because what I understood is that in the ancient world, in the world before World War II, your trophy in life was your legacy. And the thing that you were most proud of, the trophy that went on your mount, right, wasn't your accomplishments. It was your children's accomplishments. Parents, adults in general, cooperatively competed before World War II over their children. Between 1950 and 1980, that was a bougie or bourgeoisie behavior. And it has been subsequently erased from the culture except in tradwives. And tradwives do it as an act of oppositional defiance to the culture. But that's what religion is, effectively. Any religion is oppositional defiance of the culture. And what you do is you set your tenets of your religion, you set your dogma around whatever thing you are opposing. And then you write books and you justify interpretations of older books and of history itself to fit your claim. And so what I'm going to do is interpret history to fit my claim that you need to practice grinding in the way that I do. You need to practice being bored, and you need to practice tedium. Why? Because boredom and tedium are, in fact, enriching behaviors. I've asked, what do you do that enriches you like good bread? And so when you look at bread and it says vitamin enriched, which breads have to have vitamins pumped into them? Which foods have to have nutrients added to them in order to make them food? Otherwise, they're just meal. They're just filler, but they don't actually provide any nutritional value. They're just calories, in other words. Meal means calories, you understand. So what foods have to be enriched in order to not just be calories? Well, breads and cereals, right? Well, which breads and which cereals? The white ones, the ones that are bleached. Well, what does the bleaching process do? Does it take all of the nutrients away? No. It's the choicest flour, the choicest meal. And what's happened is all the nutrients, all of the dirt and all of the other plants have been ground out of it. And so what that means is that you have to put dirt back in it. And they really do. They sprinkle iron that has been ground into a dust in your children's cereal, right? In your bread. You need that dirt that comes with brown bread. You need those seeds that would normally be sifted out. You need all that mess. Why do you need all that mess? Because that is the nutritionally viable part. But here's the thing. It's also so small, it just seems like it's negligible. Right, negligibility. Grinding proves that tolerances and arriving at tolerances that appear negligible to the eye absolutely are not. And so now I'm going to tell you a story from my childhood. I grew up in mechanical engineering. What does that mean? That means I grew up in front of the machines that you see on How It Works, watching machines turn lumps of metal or partially shaped pieces of metal into parts of other things. And then I spent a year of my life in front of a grinder wheel with my dad, putting 30 or 40 foot tubes through this grinder wheel to polish them, to remove millimeters, micrometers of material from these tubes so that they shone. We burnished them, in other words. And it is the single most tedious thing you will ever do. You watch a 20-foot pole go through 2 spinning wheels, making the most awful noise. It sounds exactly what you think it sounds like when iron rubs against stone for hours. Moving less than an inch a second. So slow. It took like 15 minutes or something for those bars to go through. So slow. Not bars, they were tubes, really. So slow. So tedious. And you just have to stand there. And you can't miss a beat. When the next one needs to go in, it has to go in. Or you're going to be doing this for even longer. This is going to take forever, is what it feels like when you walk in. And so what you can't think about is how long it is going to take or how long it is taking. You just can't think about that. Because if you think about it, you're going to hyperfixate on it and you're going to go insane, is what you're going to do. You're going to go mad. Well, why are you going to go mad? Because the time won't pass. Why does that matter? Because your human brain is designed to notice the passage of time. And so you'll drive yourself insane working a millstone, right? Being Sisyphus, pushing a rock uphill that's only going to roll back down, and you have to push it back up again. That wasn't just a punishment. It was a punishment, but it wasn't just a punishment. And we millennials and people about 5 years older, people about 45 and under, we resent the Sisyphean nature of life. Like there's not enough incentive in the world to intentionally and knowingly become Sisyphus. And the answer is you were born Sisyphus, friend. You were born Sisyphus. This is why parents were taught to rejoice infant death. Well, they'd never had to experience the grind. This is why this is why in the post-Socratic traditions, the post-Socratic, post-philosophical traditions, what you see is a general, not just acceptance, but embrasure, oh, thank God, death has come, about near death. Like, oh, thank God, it's over. And there you see it in the Catholic tradition. You're supposed to praise when people die. You're not supposed to mourn. And so that does mean that I need to teach how to mourn. Because as I've said, hope is the refusal to mourn. But so is resentment. And what we do is, millennials, what we do is we resent that our trophies meant nothing. And we resent that our trophies continue to mean nothing. And that our accomplishments at work mean nothing. And do you remember me asking you what you do that matters? What you do that you can put your hands on and that you can hold and that you can have, right? These are ancient ideas that were ripped away from you 20 years before you were born. The 1960s and the 1970s, the post-World War II cultural milieu was about ripping away from you your legacy. Because what the 1960s and 70s did, is they made the second way of treating children. Because the first way, the children are dumb and what they need to be is useful. That comes from the farm. The other way that we were taught to treat children is like they're precious and they have to be sheltered and protected, and that they can't care for themselves and they can't be useful, and that asking them to be useful is trauma. So that came in the 60s. That didn't come with our children, with us, our childhoods rather. That came with our parents. Our parents were taught one or the other, and then they went a little bit nutty teaching us in defiance of their parents that everybody wins. Well, you're in the United States. Everyone wins. Everyone gets a trophy. Everyone gets to participate. Everyone gets credit. Everyone's the same. Is that true? Everyone is not the same. Everyone is not just as qualified as everyone else. Everyone doesn't smell as good as everyone else. Not everyone's shit is as healthy as everyone else. No. There are lesser and greater, better and worse, efficient and inefficient ways to live. We could continue that list. I should have put myself on D&D. I was getting good at that, and then I was hoping that Madge wouldn't be awake yet. That's on me. Okay? The grind is how you get better. I like these games. I'm going to end now that Madge is awake, because he's probably going to go live soon, and I need to support him, which means I need to start getting about with my actual day, which also means I need to get out of this tent and stop talking to the future, where people can hear me out here. I can go and I don't know why I didn't turn on D&D while I'm talking about it, because I'm ending this video now that he's awake and the sun is actually starting to come up. I can go and hang out in Panera or something. It's not like I need to charge my phone. I manage that so perfectly. What I could actually do is just sit around and literally beat off if I wanted to. So, for hours, if that's actually how I wanted to spend my time. It's not, but if it is, I could. I managed my time so well, and I've been productive, not because I was bored, but because I was thinking about grinding and why I do it. And I wanted to tell you the story about how I stood in front of that grinder as a child, and it changed my worldview. It changed my way of life. This is what adulthood really is. This isn't going to make me better at anything. That's what you think. Because that's what I thought. And for a long time, like I told you, I used to have to rationalize how I spent my time to my mother. I had to make the way I spent my time seem reasonable to my mother. I resented standing in front of that machine because all of my friends got to play video games. But now as an adult, I see that they weren't getting better. Because if we do a little bit of history, it hasn't been long enough for us to do this. It hasn't been long enough for us to have done this as a society. Because we no longer understand that legacy isn't what we've done. Legacy is our children. Legacy is what our children do, and what our children might do, and what our children are capable of. And the reason for that is because World War II is the dividing line between when whole generations died before the age of 40. Whole generations. There just weren't old people like there are today. And so this woman, this bus driver, these other elderly people over 50 that I meet, they're a wonderful and beautiful resource to me, not just as a storyteller, and a particularly not very good one, but as a person who was intentionally withheld from the culture because my mother didn't trust. My mother didn't trust that anything that she had been taught, anything that you were being taught, and anything that I might be taught was right. Because my mother knew how badly she had been damaged by the culture wars. And my parents understood that the 90s is when the culture wars replaced battlefield combat. And the reason my parents understood that better than your parents maybe did isn't because my parents were engaged in the culture war. It's because my father was a soldier. But not only was my father a soldier, I think my father is gay. I think my father is a closeted homosexual. And so my father could look out into the world and he could see that men like him were no longer willing to fight and die to prove their masculinity. My father fought, and he looked death in the eye, and he got out. He didn't re-enlist. He could have gone and fought in the Gulf and Iraq in 90 or 91, whenever that was. They wanted him to, and he said, "Nah, I don't need to die for this country." That war was the first war in history where a nation's people said, "Nah, I don't take my identity, and I don't leave my legacy, and I don't seek my glory, and I don't want to be honored for associating with this nation and its behavior overseas." Overseas is only how the England and the United States think in terms of foreign people. Abroad. We're the first generation to be raised by people who refuse to fight for their country. But I want you to really think. I'm going to leave you with that. I've been Shaggy Philalitea. Philalitea means lover of truth. It's a religious designation. I speak the truth, nothing but the truth. And if I find myself lying, I want to correct it, because I don't love the lie and I don't want to remember a lie. Spending time grinding out, perfecting my mnemonic connections within my brain, my neuronal network, so I can speak cromulently, only to remember the lie, is inefficient. And ineffective. And unacceptable to me. And so I like this grind. I like grinding these video games, because I realized at that wheel that my thoughts were like that steel. And the more I had them, and the better I refined my questions when I asked my dad things, the better answers I got. And the better answers I got, well, the better my thoughts were able to be. And then the better my questions were able to be refined, and I was able to grind and polish myself while I ground these bars. While I stood around and did nothing, I could refine myself. I could think about how I could be better. I could think about big things. And that's how Rob first came into my life. Was standing in front of a CNC machine that was drilling holes in brake calipers. Every 2 minutes, I had to take the brake calipers out, put fresh brake calipers in. So now I got 2 minutes of downtime. And you can use that downtime singing songs. You can use that downtime doing nothing, thinking nothing, going into a trance state, being totally zen. And I did both of those things. And then you can also have a religious experience and a ball of light that was once encased in a human shell can enter your body, and you can see things that you've never seen before. You can have a visual experience, and you can realize that your life is different. Your life is different now. You're not a CNC machinist, Vincent. You are something else. You're a storyteller, maybe a prophet. maybe even something much more ancient than that. And I realized that in talking to you the way I do, I leave you feeling too much like you missed something. Telling you, you missed a lot. You missed so much. Is to you telling you that you don't get a trophy. I've been stacking all these trophies. And then you've been taught to resent people like me. Resent me. Why? Why do you resent me? I was really upset about that for a really long time, and I couldn't figure it out. And it made me mad. Why do you resent me, of all people? Of all people, me? I'm not Donald Trump. But it's because you think I'm Johnny Appleseed. You think I was here first. You think that squatters' rights exist on IP, intellectual property. You think that there's a squatter's rights to religion. Because there is. There is. That's what the monastic tradition is. The ascetic goes out into the wild. And the ascetic camps down in the wild. And the ascetic invites you to visit him. Well, what happens when you visit the ascetic is you realize that the wilderness isn't nearly so wild and nearly so strange and nearly so scary as you thought. And then you get comfortable in the wild. And then the wild manifests its weirdness to you. And you become more like the ascetic. Europe was colonized and populated by ascetics. Europe, north of Italy and south of Denmark and east of, I believe it's the River Rhine, was a solitude, is what it's called. A solitudinous forest. A forest so deep that even stepping inside it was to step beyond even the reach of the sun, was to be utterly alone. From the perspective of two people being in a solitude together, it was my experience with my tiny toes. You could be looking right at a person, and then if you walked around a tree and they stepped from that exact spot, you would never see them again. It's not like that now. Why isn't it like that now? Well, the reason it's not like that now is because monastics went out there and they learned to live in that woods. And then people came to visit them, realized that woods wasn't that scary. They let their pigs search for truffles in those woods. And those woods died on their own accord. Those pigs absolutely destroyed those woods. And that is why pigs aren't kosher in the Jewish religion. Because the pigs will destroy the Asherah trees. That's real. And so I like these grindy games. Because I'm not really worried about the trophy of having beaten this game. I don't really get off on having beaten it. There's no, even the achievements like, PC, Steam and Xbox and PlayStation 5. Steam and Xbox and PlayStation, I should say. Hearthstone, World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft really made it popular. I don't know if they innovated it for the first time, but they made it ubiquitous. Achievements that you can share with people. Look, I did it, and I have proof I did it. Accreditation. Big deal now. Millennials needed accreditation. Why did millennials need accreditation? Because millennials experienced 9/11. And millennials saw what happened when people with no accreditation get in places they have no business being. People die. That's what happens. The answer is people die. The result, not the answer. The result is that people die. And millennials said, no, not that. And so now everything is about accreditation, proving, leaving a track record. Not leaving a track record. Having other people give you trophies. If you have the trophy, if you have the plaque, you attended class, if you have the diploma, if you participated, well, then you're allowed to continue participating. But if you've ever conscientiously objected, you're no longer allowed participation. Why? There's a good reason. Because if you're not doing the grind, your nose isn't sharp. Your nose isn't shiny enough to be trusted. You can't be trusted. Other people don't trust you. It's so funny. The scientific method of peer review is being criticized now by adult millennials because they don't want multiple attestation. They don't want to know whether multiple people think they're right because they don't trust those people. Why? Because those people stacked trophies instead of accomplishments. They stacked achievements instead of finished parts, finished product. And so I have written down my next topic, now that I've spent some time explaining to you why I grind and why I like these grindy games. You know, you get better every fight. I mean, you see my guys are getting better. They're gaining job levels. And I have the goal of trying to get everybody maxed out in every job with this run. Level 99 is whatever. Every job goes to level 99. And in this version, the Pixel Remaster, they don't matter. The levels don't start to really stack up after 50. They don't really need you to get that high level. But I am fairly certain that in this master is still the original game with the original game's mechanics underneath all of it, and underneath this childish and pretty skin, to invite children to grind and want to get better and to give themselves, you know, these Final Fantasy games. The reason I play them is because they have micro goals for you to give yourself. You know, like maybe the most pleased I've been with myself in recent memory is when I got my hero classes in Final Fantasy, and you'll be able to see that moment. It will premiere later this week. I'm really proud of that. I got really excited. I did it. That was a goal of my own. And so I talked to you in time management about setting your own goals and achieving your own goals and being a self-starter and why all that's important and how managing your time is important. Well, there's time that's yours and there's time that's not yours, and the grind isn't necessarily about separating the two. It's about making everything, it's about finding the time, if this is going to be maybe how I segue from time management to my next topic. I'm going to tell you what it is. Maybe what I want you to know is that even during the grind, you can be useful. So even during the boring part of driving the bus, and I haven't finished with her, and I'm so glad that I ended it this way. This looks like I wrote this. Even while she's doing this extremely tedious job of driving the same bus route. You know, you think your commute to work is boring? Imagine working a 12-hour shift where you make your commute to work and back, and that's all it is. That's your 12-hour day. You know, driving a bus is fucking boring. That's why they get paid so well. She was telling us she gets paid very well. She could get paid even better. She's on me. That's why we were alone on the bus. And because I empathize with people and the difficulties of their job, they tend to be frank and forthright about how well they're actually paid. And so because I'm sympathetic without saying, well, your job must suck and you must hate it, right? I go, that is really difficult. That is a bummer, is basically what I say. And I try to find a bright side. And they, because I try to find a bright side to encourage them, many people, especially people that are older than millennials, remember to be grateful for the struggle, because they remember that the trophies are handed out in death. The trophies that matter, they're handed out in death. And they remember that they're approaching death, and that they don't want to go to their death with people actually believing they were bitter about their public service, because they like it. What they don't like is the constant disrespect. And so, now we're back to the golden rule. If we just respect one another, that is a trophy in its own right. Like, if you want to take trophies, if you want to have things to put on your mantle, sure, it's hard to show to other people. But you can tell the story, and that's where trophies began. You understand that trophies began with, antlers and with big fish stories. Like, you understand that the trophy is a hunting metaphor. And so when we're talking about pursuing happiness, we're speaking in hunting metaphors. We appreciate that, right? Like, we know that, and we think about it, right? And we focus on that, right? Probably not, but we should. We need to remember that. Oh, damn, there's a bow in there I want. We need to remember that, because, not only were our ancestors hunter-gatherers, but outside of city life, most people supplemented their meals, right, by hunting. And one of the ways you get the binding agent that is fat for your gravy is by hunting. So if you've got venison, you've got a little bit of fat. It may not be as much as you want, but it may not be like a cow, but you've got fats. And fats are what keep you alive. And so maybe we need to spend some time thinking about what is the meat and what is the fat and what are the meal of information and of our world, and maybe that's something that you need to work on. Maybe that's not a metaphor that I need to spend time thinking about, but maybe it's one that you can offer suggestions to me. So we've got a complex system here: meal, meat, and binding agent, fat in this case. Maybe you can tell me how that Celtic knot of things forms your life. What is the bread that you eat, right? And we are speaking in terms of the abstraction. I'm talking like Jesus, right? What actually sustains your life? What are your nutrients? What is your binding agent, right? What holds your life together? And do you need to grind the materials that you're trying to make into bread a little bit finer? Do you need to enrich them with other nutrients? You understand what I'm saying? That bus driver for half an hour spoke to me and another woman on the bus. And every single time she missed a single stop, every single time she approached a bus stop, she would interrupt herself to say, "This is that stop," the name of the stop, and then go right back in where she left off. And you could tell that she was struggling with it. And you could tell a few times that she was struggling to do that, say what she was saying, and manage the flow of traffic. Well, what's that about? Why not just not do one or the other things? Why not? That's 3 things that she's doing. Why not simplify her system? It's very complex what she's doing. The other women simplify their systems. They don't much talk. And they never announce the stops. So why not simplify the system the way they do? Well, that's boring, isn't it? When you grow up in town, you just suffer the boring, and then you bitch about it, and then you move on. Because you're not mourning not being bored. You have no hope to not be bored. You're just gonna be bored. You have no hope. But you also have no resentment, because you don't feel a pressure, so to speak, to get better at anything while you're doing this. So as an athlete, something you can notice among people who have a drive and they want to get good at something is that they find the things between them and that thing frustrating, right? Like a bit in the mouth. And if you know horses, the bit in the mouth is something that modern humanitarians who want to extend humanitarian considerations to animals, and I think we should, many of them. This one is a little silly. They think that the bit is torture. Well, the interesting thing about bits is that they're actually made with an amount of lead that's safe for the horse, not because it's a softer metal. Yes, it's a softer metal, but it also tastes good. So the bit in your mouth is not the incentive. It's the thing that you chomp down on because it kind of tastes good while you're grinding out your day. You know, the horse has to submit to the bit and the bridle, but horses grow to enjoy the work. Do you think it's stimulating being a horse? You think horses are stimulated by pasturage? No. Horses are bored. Animals are bored at all times. This is why, like, when we talk about, like, rabbits, like when we talk about non-human animals, people who are familiar with non-human animals, the only things they really have to say is that all animals really do is eat and fuck. It's really all animals do. Animals spend so much time, because their lives are so simple, looking for food, that all there really is to break up the tedium is fucking, right? And humans are significantly more intelligent and have been significantly more intelligent since our basically our pre-chimpanzee ancestors than the average human animal, even the average primate. And just look at our primate near ancestors like bonobos and chimpanzees, and most of what they do is eat and fuck. Bonobos have a whole social currency and economy around casual sex. And so do humans. Like small towns, I don't know about small towns, but neighborhoods within middle-sized towns absolutely do. And I've known many women who weren't just willing, but wanted a commute of between 30 minutes and 2 hours to regular casual sex, because they just didn't want to engage with the people around them anymore, sexually or otherwise. And there's probably oh my God. There's probably a euphemism here about participation trophies for sex. And I know that when we were children, high school age, middle school, that's how we treated people who made the claim to be active and engaged. Is all, you're just trying to claim participation trophy. So this is why, for decades, men would keep trophies, like a girl's panties or whatever. And then this is why, Jasmine says, I'm not just some prize to be won. And so I would encourage you, I think, here at the end, to be more like the bus driver that people talk shit about. I think what you want to do is be the kind of person that people kinda talk shit about. An upright person is a person not only who does what's right, but does what's right for them and what works for them, no matter the slings and arrows of misfortune that are cast their way. This is what Job gets wrong. Job was an upright man to his agreement that he made with God, but it was idiosyncratic and it wasn't what God wants. He wasn't listening to God, right? I think we can all learn from that. I don't think any of us is dissimilar from that. I think we can be upright by paying attention, close attention, not to what the people around us are telling us about us, not to what people are saying about us behind our backs, not to what they're saying. We don't want to pathologize. I talked about this. I am telling you what I have learned now, and I'm done. So I'm going to get out of this now. And I'm from the Midwest. And goodbyes are difficult for me. They just are. Oh, I see what I'm doing wrong. Yeah, that's probably the end of the video, because I don't remember what I was saying now, and I've said everything I had planned to say. I tried to plan this one out in my head a little bit as I lay here in the dark. That's called meditation. I think we want to take more credit for the work we have done. I think what we want to do is be proud of grinding. If we look at our athletes, I think the NFL is very instructive. But if we look at our athletes and we listen to our coaches, what they say is that the people they admire, the athletes and the coaches, the people they admire in their professions are the people who get the most out of their grind time. The people who, when they work, improve. And don't just improve, but improve in ways that you can see and rapidly. I think that is the trophy that you want. Not for showing up to work. You don't want your participation paycheck. What you want is to know that you did the best you could and that you got better every day. I think that's the dragon that we all need to be chasing. We all need to be chasing. Since I have started chasing that dragon in simplicity for simplicity's sake, cutting my life down to the most bare essentials, every little bit of improvement that I make, like being able to slide right into my sleeping bag and go to sleep last night, that was an improvement over my sleep situation. Getting all of my stuff that absolutely cannot freeze at night in my bag and being comfortable with it, and then not tossing and turning as I roll around on it because I just can't get comfortable. None of that. That's an improvement. I take credit for that. I'm proud of that, right? And so I would encourage you to evaluate. Just look at your life You don't have to be negative in your evaluation. You don't have to be critical, negative in your criticism. You can be positively critical. You can look at your life and you can say, well, what am I good at? And how do I know I'm good at it? And see, here's the thing that millennials not all, but millennials en masse figured out with the COVID year is that you can get good at anything with commitment. So it might be that I think this video is my best talking to the future video I've ever made, because I'm thinking back. Part of why these outros are so long is I like to circle back in my head and just make sure I didn't leave anything untied. And I kept my scope specific. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of what I've made here. I'm proud of all of these. You know, I'm proud of every single view, even if it's just 7 minutes. You know, a lot of people, not proud is maybe the wrong word, but I give myself credit for every view, even if it's just 7 minutes. Like, you know, you get a video and it says 1 view, average watch duration, 3 minutes. And it's like, hey, I got 3 minutes. I got 3 minutes of that person's time, and they realized, this isn't really for me. But they clicked into a video as long as mine, and they thought, it's in my history now. I'm in your history. I'm in your history. 3 minutes of interacting with me is in your life and in your head. And there's a non-zero chance that with familiarity, as I start to show up in your feed more and more and more and more, you'll give me a chance. And then the bigger those view totals get without me inflating them, the more credit I can take that, hey, people are giving me a chance. Once YouTube has the analytics, the views necessary for me to know my unique views, my returning views, all of that is not there for you to punish yourself with. That's what so many early creators get. Now I remember. Next time I get into a new topic that's not either grinding or time management, what I'm going to talk about is the difference between content and contentment, and whether I'm not a contentment creator rather than a content creator. Because what I don't want to make is content, because content doesn't matter, but contentment matters. And I want you to be content with what you've done. I want you to be able to sleep without nightmares, like I've done. I didn't get stoned and I went to sleep and I didn't have nightmares. That's an improvement. Doesn't seem like much, but for me, it's huge. And so I want to show you how to do that. I want to show you how to make contentment. And you can make contentment in strangers just by smiling at them. Have a great day. Whenever it is day for you next, take care of yourself. And you can take care of yourself by thinking about how you could be better. Because that's how we show that we care, is by showing up for the grind. Show up for the grind in your life. It'll become easy. It'll give you room for self-improvement. It'll give you time for self-improvement. And then you can find micro goals to work at and practice, even if only I ever noticed them. You know, something that we don't understand about time magic is sometimes our lives, as far as God is concerned, are only happening so that one event in our lives can happen. We don't have to know whether we're the person that sparked this other person's whole life, their whole future, the A that follows their B. We can never know that. But we can live as though we want to be. When I smile at strangers, like when I walked into the Dollar General yesterday to get my Mountain Dew and my bag of popcorn, which is how I would actually rather spend that money, is just getting some hand to mouth and a Mountain Dew and watching my guy on stream and just living for an hour like you all get to live. That's how I'd rather spend my money.
because it is a good way to live. It's nice. It's nice to have a little snack and a little snacky snack and a little downtime and a little nothing to do and watch a little bit of something and not think about how I can get better. It is nice. It's nice to have real downtime, to take my backpack off and just take a load off. Kick it with my guys. But this isn't that. And you know, if I'm inviting you to kick it with me, that's because I'm just a low-key guy, and I am kicking it right now, right? I'm grinding, but I got my feet kicked up. I'm grinding my thoughts, you know? Those are the food that I end up eating more often than anything. So thank you for being here. You know, I keep telling you this, but it's important to me to repeat. There was a time in my life where I didn't feel thankful for doing this, and I said it anyway. I didn't feel grateful to you. I didn't feel grateful to a future audience. I didn't feel grateful to anyone that I was doing this. I felt like I was doing it as an act almost of spite to myself, not even to spite you. Despite me, I am going to do this because it needs to be done. But I think I've found a way to enjoy doing it, but not just enjoy doing it, to be thankful for the opportunity to do it. So thankful for the opportunity to be doing this. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And most importantly, and I really do mean this, I really mean this, thank you for making an effort in a stranger's life. You can never know who needs it. And you know, they used to tell us as children, they used to tell us to just offer to help people. Just go up, hey, can I carry your bags for you? Hey, I got you. I'll do that for you. And you don't understand the way people look at you different. There's a woman who comes into the Christ Kitchen who every time she sees me, I can see that she's looking to see if my smile cracks. Because I offered to help people where she could see who needed it. And I didn't ask for anything in return. And when I was given praise, when I was given the verbal trophy for having done it, I said, no, they needed my help. And who am I to just pretend like they didn't need help? Well, there you go. That doesn't have to be immoral. I don't have to be judging you. But who are you to pretend they need help? They don't need help. Just help. Women need help. Women who are alone, they're going to act like they don't need help, but they need help. And fine, I'm a man, so it looks weird when I offer to help, but you know what you do? You don't expect anything in return for helping a woman, and you know what you will get? A thank you. And that'll be enough. So you're helping me. I'm a person in need. I need these views. I need these likes. I need these subs. I need these comments. But I no longer need the tips. And so I woke up and I did this thinking about my stripper rules video. You don't even bother if you're not gonna participate in the economy of helping me grow. Don't even bother. And I stand by that. But it's a lot easier than you think to help me grow. And right now, just getting here to the end helps me grow. So thank you for that. Seriously. Thank you.